I'm trying. Did I put up the thing tonight? I'm looking for like quick stuff, but that's nice. Okay, so we're ready to start. Good morning to everybody. At this time, 10:05, I am going to call the Success Through Attendance Recovery Task Force to order. We will start with a roll call vote. Well, a roll call, I'm sorry, not a vote. A roll call.
I'll do it. Mr. Adams?
Here.
Mr. Adams.
She heard Miss Adams.
Ms. Austin? Ms. Bonaventure? Ms. Boudreaux? Mr. Kane?
Here.
Judge Darrensburg? Dr. Davis? Judge Edwards? Ms. Francis? Judge Grover? Mr. Morris? Ms. Pagel?
I'm replacing her, so I hope you won't mind me.
Yes, please. Beth?
My last name is MNILLHO.
Okay, and you're replacing her because she's no longer the president, correct? Can you come to the table, please, ma'am? I knew that there was going to be a replacement, but I didn't know who just yet. We will correct our agenda with your name in the future. Representing PTA, right? Yes, yes. All right. Ms. Ponder?
Here.
Mr. Russell?
Here.
Dr. Simmons?
Here.
Ms. Sims?
Here.
Myself is present. Ms. Smith?
Here.
Yes. Mr. Winfrey? Ms. Weish? And our chair is here as well. Thank you all for joining us. Now we will move to our next item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from April 19th, 2024. There's a copy on the table. If you fail to pick that up, we can definitely get you a copy.
Make a motion.
Yeah, motion by Ms. Francis, seconded by Mr. Kane, that we approve the minutes. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, motion passes. Is that coming in? I don't know yet. I think it is. All right, our next item on the agenda is consideration of an update report regarding multi-tiered systems support, including the utilization of parent notes. Do we have a motion to receive the report? It's moved by Judge Grover. Is there a second? Seconded by Dr. Davis. I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Adams.
Greetings. As stated before, I'm so happy to be here today.
Oh, it's here. I got to do it. That's for that one. Oh. Yeah, keep going. I'm sorry.
That's okay. So, as we can see, we wanted to discuss those multi-tiered systems of support. We discussed this in our last meeting and
Loud.
we discussed MTSS in our last meeting and how helpful it has actually been for the state of Louisiana to move to looking at attendance with an MTSS lens. And so I just wanted to make sure that we were all on the same page when it came to the definitions and what you understand about MTSS. We know that it is holistic and data-driven framework that illustrates interventions that have been tailored to address chronic absence. Again, we want to focus on all absence that contribute to learning loss. It improves attendance by personalizing the tiered interventions. Again, we're not tiering students, we're tiering interventions. And the MTSS group interventions, we have them in three different tiers. Tier 1, that's universal interventions. That's for everyone. That's how you're creating a culture for your school, making students feel like they belong, having families feeling like they're connected. Tier 2, that's early intervention. So we have those students that are missing 10 to 19% of the school year. We've broken it down in our workbook by 3 to 5 days. That allows us to do an individualized prevention plan, and 6 to 9 days, which allows us to do early intervention. And then tier 3 is those severe chronic absences, missing 20% or more. Again, we're working with the tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, so that we're addressing all students through interventions versus just tiering students. What you need to know in terms of what we're collecting, again, that school-wide prevention, clear ownership and leadership. I think I've shared that with you guys. We don't want to talk to principals about buy-in. We want to talk about ownership of this work. And so we're creating attendance teams. We spoke before about what's happened in Baker and how they saw amazing progress in their attendance by creating attendance teams at every school, but also not just creating those teams, getting actual support for those teams at each school. We had routine data analysis where every time those teams met, they actually printed out chronic absence reports. They were looking for the students that were missing 10% of the school year as they were going. So they weren't waiting for them to miss 5 days before they said that this child is on the road to being chronically absent. They were moving with the percentage. And of course, coming up with the strategic plan, which is our workbook. We're increasing and showing that you don't need to reinvent the wheel. We've given a blueprint that can be found on the LDOE website on that workbook and how that you can create your teams, establish the roles, and when each person should do or follow up with the students. Now, when it comes to that tier 2 intervention and support, we increase the monitoring. You'll see that, as well as, again, data analysis is important. Also, determine the appropriate intervention. Again, when we get to tier 2, we don't want to automatically think that something is terribly wrong. Have we done the necessary empathy interview? You'll find that we've mentioned with Baker, they implemented those success attendance plans. That's a tier 2 intervention. That's where you're actually doing some type of empathy interview to find out what are the barriers, the aversions, or disengagements that are happening to cause that student to be chronically absent. And when you find out what's happening, you're actually creating interventions to support that family and that student. And then you're not only just creating this plan, you're following up. And then you're continuously following up until that child is no longer chronically absent, until that family feels like they're connected again to the school. And of course, determine if there's a need for more intense intervention. And of course, moving to tier 3 does not mean we're going automatically to court. That means that we are actually looking at those students that are missing 10 or more days. Notice, we're already seeing they're chronically absent before we even hit the definition, because we want to catch them before they actually are. And we want to review daily with these types of students and then acknowledge the improvements. As you know, LDOE has developed an improvement in attendance award that has been signed by our basic board president as well as our superintendent, because that's how important our improvement in attendance is across the state. Now, this is our Louisiana Attendance Alliance MTSS. Those that are blessed to be a part of my distribution list learned about this during during many of our calls, where again, you do not have to reinvent the wheel when it comes to looking at how your MTSS framework should look. We've shared with you what needs to happen at tier 1, or what some ideas that could happen at tier 2, or some interventions that you can implement at tier 3. So again, as data analysis goes up and family inclusion also goes up as we get higher, But across the board, we're looking at teen and adult wellness and development. So tier 1, which is those universal tiered approaches, we're talking about engaging school culture. Again, those that are on my distribution list know that on the alert at the end, I often share, this is the month of, just so that you have an idea of how can we include these different cultures or these different activities throughout our schools to make sure that our schools feel welcoming and our families and our students feel like they belong. Also, PBIS and other incentives. I often share that PBIS should also include attendance. Kids can't learn proper behaviors if they're not there. So again, including attendance helps as part of that universal support. And then going up to tier 2, we love check in, check out, but also all of these mentoring agencies, they're looking for ways to get into your schools. Being an attendance mentor can actually be beneficial for not only the mentor, but also the development of a student as well. Just to have someone call them and check in actually would help at that tier 2, along with those attendance success plans. And of course, tier 3. What you will know that we are pushing is when it comes to court intervention, that is like tier 3C. If you see here, we talk about case management, home visits, individual attention, external referrals, warnings, but also community referrals to task and VINs. We want to make sure that we're not engaging families prematurely. We want to make sure we've gone through all of these different tiers before we get up to those levels. So I've learned going around the state that actually tier 1 is kind of hard for people. They go straight to tier 2B, all the way back up to tier C. So let's discuss some tier 1 interventions. 1 is for all students. That means that every student in the school is going to be affected by this type of activity. I love that in DeSoto Parish, they actually created a attendance dashboard. How does that affect every student? Because every parent gets to go on and see where their school is in terms of attendance that day. Also, some schools are actually sending around trophies. And if your class has the highest average daily attendance rate, then you get to get the trophy for that week. Again, though every child has an opportunity to participate in some type of activity like that. Also, it creates a positive school climate. That is essential. I think I've shared with you guys on my framework how we look at the psychosocial issues that our kids have, how they impact attendance. And the first thing we know that is if a student feels safe, they come to school. That is the top issue when it comes to psychosocial issues that impact our students. When they don't feel safe, they don't come. But when they feel safe, they do. Other things can be happening, but if they feel safe there, they'll show up. Also promotes positive behavior and attendance. Again, when we do these different tier 1 interventions, we're doing more than just saying, just come to school. We're creating a culture in which they're ready to learn, they're ready to grow, and they're ready to be successful. So one of the things that we've been able to do, of course, in Louisiana, we started doing attendance awareness campaigns across the state. That has been super successful, as well as acknowledgement of student cultures through activities. Again, I've seen a couple in Union Parish, the elementary school, they have these amazing multicultural days where they invite families to share what they're eating and what they're learning and what they're, what it looks like in their home cultures. Also, aligning attendance with PBIS. I often share that my Sunday story. We have the worst kid in the world, and he shows up every day at school. Why are we not celebrating him? That means he feels safe enough to come every day. That's an opportunity to explore his behavior. That's an opportunity to learn what's causing the behavior because he comes every day. So we're going to invite him to the PBIS celebration so he can get the ice cream. Well, he's going to get to the party. and he's gonna have his ice cream, and then he's gonna see the kid with the sprinkles, and he's gonna say, hey, how do you get the sprinkles? And we're gonna say, because his conduct was good. And he's gonna say, oh, so if I just act right, I can get sprinkles. Okay. Next PBIS celebration, he shows up because he came every day. Now he gets to show up to the party and he gets the ice cream and the sprinkles. And he's like, oh, wow, great. And he walks past little Susie, and little Susie has whipped cream and a cherry. Hold on. How'd she get that? Oh, she just improved her grades. You mean tell me if I just stop pretending that I don't know so my friends don't think something wrong with me, I can just get the whole Sunday? That next week, he's gonna go for the whole Sunday and get it. This is what I need you to remember. If he was never in the room, he would never get inspired. And that's what we have to remember. So including just attendance into your PBI celebrations would actually be super impactful in many, many ways. Also, basic needs closets. When I worked in the school system, that was one of the first things that I implemented. Why? Because when their basic needs are met, we're competing with less. That means I'm not competing with a growling stomach. I'm not competing with a child that doesn't feel less than because they feel like they're not clean enough. When we have basic needs closets implemented, it actually did increase our attendance because kids felt safe enough to tell me what was wrong and knew that we would support what was happening and not judge. And they knew if they could just get here, because that was the name of the initiative, just get here. If they knew if they could just get here, we would take care of their basic needs and make sure that they could get to class and focus on their schoolwork. Also, monthly family engagement activities. Notice I'm not talking about one-off. Donuts with dad, that was great back then. Right now, dad might not be the best stakeholder or the most influential stakeholder. So we don't want to alienate people. We want to say, how about donuts with our very special person? Because I've met students where their cousin is their best stakeholder. And we want that person to come and we can engage them. So I share this information with you guys so that you understand why looking at attendance with an MTSS lens is super beneficial and has been beneficial in the state of Louisiana, but also to learn and get a bit more feedback from you as well. So based on the presentation, are there any statutory or policy considerations that should be addressed?
This is what we want to hear from you all.
And let me say this, I think when we left last time, we talked about more standardization across the state of Louisiana. And I think one of the things we asked for, recommended was to come back to us with just kind of talking about what should be standardized across the state so that all of us are doing the same thing when it comes to truancy. Because I think like there is the basic need met child, and there are kids with medical issues, and there are kids that just want to get to school and maybe can't. But there's also the mischievous child that the bus drops them off and they run up, leave the gate to go do things that they're not supposed to be doing. So I think when we make it a standard, make it standardized, then we look at all kids to make sure that we are providing the supports that they need in every case. So I do think that we need to make sure that we talked about that standardization. How many parent notes, where I know that the notifications for parents have to go out. At what point, how many days do we want those notes to still go out before they're actually referred for truancy? And do we look at special cases in the, like you said, they have the attendance committees. So do we look at special cases of kids at 3 days, but some kids, I'm watching you walk to the gate, run into that store every day, sneak into your friend's house. How do we look at that particular kid? Because that kid is also a kid that needs to be in school. And you call the parent and the parent is like, I just dropped them off. And they don't listen to me either. So making sure that we are supporting every kid in the standardization of what truancy needs to be. Because again, like if you come to our district, what I define as chronic absenteeism, it has to be defined in the district across the way where they move from the same way, because I just don't want schools and districts to get where they're making sure they're not chronically absent because of the different rules that we have in our district. So I would love to hear what you have to say about that.
That's been one of our things in guidance we provided that we utilize the USDOE definition of chronic absence, which is 10% ongoing. I think many of the CWAs that are in here, that's one of the things that they've been looking to do, which is when we talk about 10%, we're not looking at just the day, because if you wait for the day that it happens, so if we're saying 3 days or else 5 days, if we wait until 5 days, then we've waited too late. But if we move by 10%, so if a student is missing 10% that first month, and we've caught them, that's only 3 days. We've caught them before they become truant, if those 3 days are unexcused. And we've caught them before they become chronically absent, because they are chronically absent. So we've caught them early. And so if we would have said, okay, we'll just wait until 5 days, by 3 days, if we skip the 10% and we wait till 5, we've already missed half our mark. But if we do it by 10%, then we can engage students and engage families, and we can start preventing continuous chronic absence and possibly truancy as well. Because again, if it's a student that is mixing and matching their things, where I'll have a doctor's excuse this day and I won't have one this day. Imagine if they keep doing that, they probably miss 5 days before we get 3 unexcused absences. Again, they've missed 5 days of school, which means they're already chronically absent. But if we only focus on truancy, they've already missed 2 months of school.
And are we gonna count tardies?
Tardies?
Some of us count, and I guess I want to just hear like what you guys are in the schools. What are you doing and what should we do? Because some of us count tardies.
Some of us don't count tardies. So, yeah, I don't, but like neighboring schools in New Orleans, they do. So when I look again at the truancy and absenteeism, it's based on so many different metrics
Exactly.
that it's not and I don't want your school to be reported for truant when your school should be truant on the same metrics.
Yeah.
I just think that it has to be
Which is-
some type of standardization.
While we shared with truancy, I've asked that CWAs, when they run their reports, they bring up the report of truancy. Because in the state of Louisiana, 5 unexcused absences or 5 unexcused tardies will make you truant. So, and early checkouts. So I've asked CWAs, you want to separate your counts. You want to look at truancy in 2 ways. We want to see those that are truant based off of days and those that are truant based off of tardies. Why? Because the interventions will be different.
But the definitions have to be the same.
Which is why I'm so happy we're here.
But that's-
To your point, like I wholeheartedly agree that across all systems, we have to have a language and to make sure that we're all compliant to state standards. To the point that you made, Ms. Adams, at the CWA conference about parent notes. And so there was a question that was posed about, well, how many parent notes should we accept? In our district, we've always accepted parent notes for the purpose of providing student work. So we've never denied kids an opportunity to do the work. And that was an additional practice because at the end of the day, we're there to support the needs of the student, right?
Right.
And so if you're already absent, it's like a double jeopardy, a double penalty. So I'm not giving you the work. So we've always done that. But the question that I have, should we create something that's uniform along the lines of parent notes have never been a part of, back when we had exempt and non-exempt. Parent notes fell in them, yeah. So we would have parents that provide that, right? But there's still nothing that's done. So we give you the work, but it's still factored in. We have cases where y'all know the economy is shot. We have cases where families just don't have insurance.
Yep.
So they can't get to the doctor. They can't go to those clinics where they have that sliding scale either because they can't afford that. So having some uniformity across the board where every district provides students with the work regardless of what type of absence it is. So I think that across all systems that should be the case, but also capping, right? So giving a parent a certain level of, you know, when something's going on with your child and you can't afford. So can we turn at least 2 of those parent notes? You get 2 or maybe 3 a year that we fall into the excused absence, but regardless of such, every single time we will provide you work.
I agree with that.
Yeah, that's a policy.
Someone here accepted new parent notes, you know, all parents.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, well, let's talk one at a time.
I was gonna say, I did a survey, we served in 35 schools, I could only find one school that accepted parent.
Okay, all right, Ms. Ponder?
I was just saying that remains an issue because when you are comparing data, you have to look at reliability and validity of what you're asking. If some places accept all of them, some accept none, and East Beverly Parish, we allow 5 per semester. I mean, and every place seems to be different out here.
Ms. Smith?
And EPR is 5 per semester that would go into them to be parent note, but I mean, the first 5 would be excused. Anything beyond the 5 would have to come through child welfare and attendance for review.
So it sounds like the consensus is we need to come up with something regarding how many parent notes are accepted across the state. But regardless of parent notes, work should be provided, which we have updated the
Yes.
policy where the policy has been updated. It should go into effect next
Yes.
month, correct? The rule should be final in July. So starting with the 24-25 school year, we ask that all systems provide the work regardless of the type of absence. But what I hear this group saying is we need to determine how many parent notes we should accept for these absences. Mr. Russell?
The point of clarification, are we accepting, are we focusing on the number of parent notes or are we focusing on the number of days? Because I can turn in 5 parent notes,
That's a good.
they cover 20 days.
Okay, so
So it's a note per day.
Days.
So, well, question for Ms. Smith, what do you,
But parent acts for 5 days, because the child is out sick.
Nope.
all right, so Ms. Smith, how do you all have it in EBR? 1 note equals 1 day, so, okay. I'm sorry, say that one more time. So that's another thing that needs to be thought about, standardized, is the note equals how many days? Does anybody else know about our other system, what they have in Lafayette?
We don't accept parent notes, we just document it with the state board. It still comes to our students.
Okay,
We just do 3 days. You get 3 days of notes and you're done.
3 days of notes for the whole year.
So we need to decide.
Okay, well, Jefferson, notes are unexcused.
Oh, for every.
Okay,
Look at the number of days.
wait, talk a little louder so everybody can hear you.
Like in parents, they get schoolwork, but they don't count as just a record.
This for record, okay.
For us, you can send as many as you want, but they're still counted as unexcused. We still need to provide them work. So as a CWA, I don't care how many you turn in, because it still falls under unexcused. My goal is to just get you to work. And I guess I see things differently because I was a principal. And so my goal was to make sure I was meeting the needs of the students. So for me, regardless of how many they turn in, you have it for your record keeping. That's the purpose of it. Whether it's not excused. What I'm saying is maybe we need to have some level of consideration around some of them in terms of maybe we take 2 so that we actually turn into excused, but we still provide the market.
Ms. Smith?
So for EBR, we accept 5 parent notes per semester, so they go in parent note 1, if you look at the exact this is parent note 1, excused, all the way up to 5. Beyond 5, they go in as unexcused parent note. And then for review, they have to come to WA to act to the
Okay, Dr. Davis? Okay, let's listen.
Are we allowing them to do vacation? Are we allowing them to do state?
Mhm.
What are parent notes just? Because then documents way different from parent notes.
Yes.
What are we doing?
Well, you can't justify
Okay.
vacation, because I live in a parish where that happens.
Yeah, okay, Ms. Ponder?
Here's how we're very closely together, but we have the tier 3 cases in half. So, what we do is if they have 3 successive absences, we say you must have a doctor's excuse in order for those to be excused. Because the feeling is any child is ill enough to miss 3 successive days, we need to have some kind of medical attention. So, I don't know how to.
Okay, Mr. Russell?
So, you know, purpose of the parent is to focus what? We're asking whoever would act.
I agree.
Turning parents, notes for what? What are we going to, not what are we going to do, but how are we going to use those notes for documentation purposes?
Oh, yeah.
So, you know, let's,
I would consider that those days excused or not?
so let's consider, like as Miss Dr. Simmons Smith, I forgot her name, Robin, that I remember the first name, stated, you know, sometimes there's a kid who is sick, who can't get to the doctor for whatever reason, sliding scale, too much money, or sometimes we just know that the kid needs to stay home and they're sick and they don't need to go to school, but we don't take them to the doctor. Okay, so because their temperature is high or something like that, they just don't need to go. But so do we excuse that with that parent note? Because like you're saying, Lafayette does not accept that as an excused absence, but that kid is not coming to school that one day because of that fever. So is that an excused absence with that parent note or not?
Because our notes check your temperature and your temperature is high, and we tell you you have to go home and you can't come back in 24 hours.
Y'all excuse if y'all send them home, but if the parent sends the note the next day saying they had a fever, y'all don't excuse it.
So
Mhm.
the parent's note says it exceeds the 24 hours you gave, because you said stay home for 24 hours, but 24 hours passed, it came and I checked the temperature and it's still high, so I still can't send them.
So I think to keep us moving, we need to look at how many days standardized across the state we want to excuse with a note, and what type of excusals are we going to agree on? Because it doesn't matter how many notes, just, are we gonna allow 5 days regardless in a year? I think you guys are doing 10. If you're doing 5 a semester, it's 10. So how many days are we gonna excuse with a note? And what is the excusal reason that we're gonna accept, period? What's eligible? So maybe we can define that and we can.
So if that fall under what's already in the extenuating circumstances, so we're adding personal.
I agree.
illness, to that, right?
Mhm.
So.
We have a list.
So, yeah, we have a list under extenuating circumstances, so if that parent lists something in there, then that should be considered.
And add the personal illness to that list.
Because it's already being added.
Mhm.
And then how many days do we want, whether they bring 1 note, 2 notes, whatever, how many days are we gonna allow to be considered excused before they become?
The only reason why I want to propose that you be conscious of the number is because you also have to think about the different systems. That if I don't have access to get to a doctor and we don't have a communities in school at my school, then it might take me longer to get to an actual physician. Or if I live within a culture where we don't see outside physicians and we heal ourselves, how is that being respected?
So looking at under extenuating circumstances, you gotta be like now looking at that on a case by case, because you have to have a standard. Or something that's
we do.
standardized within that extenuating circumstances, take a look, and it is sensitive to those type of things without having it so wide open.
Right.
You have no way
The reason why I ask is so that we know how to document that in our child welfare and attendance reference guide. Because we do need a standard, but we also need to be able to train our CWAs to look past that standard for extenuating circumstances.
What about if we put something in
Yes.
policy there, the parent can make it appeal to the CWA.
Yes,
So you appeal to the CWA.
I agree.
Come before them, and some of us have truancy panels, we can utilize that group, or we have a district level attendance leadership team and BLT. And then CLT. But have that team, parent come before them, and then they make a decision on whether or not they're gonna count anything that came after that standard number.
Some districts don't have, like, again, I'm on Orleans, CWA, that doesn't exist for us, so I think that creates a challenge in those districts because you have it creates a challenge for any charter school, I think, like if they're not interacting with CWA in the district. And then I think that's where we are seeing a lot of just kind of Wild West policy where people are all doing whatever. But I think like if we're having MTSS, we're hoping that they're talking about this, right? Like even if these kids are turning in notes and people are doing their job, we should be still talking about this at school.
Mr. Russell?
And then actually.
The appeals process we utilize in that very parish, it's been around for quite a while, been, supervisor, years now. And this process was in place prior to, becoming to this position. The principals or the designees, or whoever the attendance clerk may be, have already established a relationship with the parents, with the families. They know what those extenuating circumstances are. So what we have a form that we provide to the principals at the end of every school year regarding the missing of X number of days over compulsory attendance. The principals or their designees complete that form. There, they have to put the number of days out that they would like to have excused, and they provide us with the rationale as to why those days should be excused for our office to consider excusing them.
I mean, I'm talking about something different from the, I guess,
Right, forgive me.
because it already exists.
The waiver or the
Parents
appeal
have to
process.
school, so they haven't come to our office to, we have to trust our people at the school level to make the necessary.
Right.
They've established that relationship, so provide us with the paperwork and let us make a decision.
So one of the
Okay,
things that we definitely are looking at in terms of utilizing that workbook and utilizing what I've shared with you guys, same thing, but doing it soon.
Yeah.
Meaning it's great to have a standardized number for the number of parent notes you'll accept, but at the end of the day, how many days are they actually missing? And are we taking these notes just to say you're excused, or are we actually taking qualitative data that's needed to provide interventions that are needed? Because the information that the parent is providing is just as important as the note itself. Because that's what's going to help us create the interventions that's needed. Because then I can start having that conversation before that child becomes chronically absent. And before the end of the year, when they have 20+ absences.
I think like if we're looking at the revised statute, it says, they're not completely children until they're at 5. So whether we accept a parenthood or not, like we kind of give our parents the blueprint of let's not exceed 5 before the end of the first semester. If we can slowly start improving that, building the rapport with parents that they're not exceeding 10 before the end of the year. We're currently doing that right now, meeting with parents during the summer. We pull data and we have scheduled meetings with parents because we have that task grant this year. So we're trying to be proactive on that end, but the law states that they're not chewing until they're at 5. So they're already given some leeway where we're not being punitive or really like holding feet to fire, but we can start from our meeting, is what you're basically doing with chronic absentee, and that's what we told the parents. We're giving you this how are we getting the letter in the summer? Because we're being proactive. Because there is a legislature coming down that's going to require more with the parent, a monthly meeting once you're truant. Once you're at 5, a monthly meeting. So let's jump on it ahead of the game. So even if we did a parent note, they still have up to 5 days before we would technically be looking at an intervention to refer to court or anything like that. And then I also think, like Mr. Russell said, is that we have rapport with our families. We know our frequent flyers, so they're already on our radars. So once they're at like 3 days, and we know they ended the year last year with 20 days, we're talking to them this summer. We're making intentional phone calls to those parents this summer, and we're saying, we're here to help. This is what you have. We've got uniforms, like we've got, what do you need? So we're hoping that we will be able to see a slowdown in our truancy rate in Lafayette Parish this upcoming school year because of the summer intervention.
Ashley.
So, hi, good morning. I'm Ashley Townsend, Deputy Chief of Policy. And so I've been listening, trying to make notes of policy recommendations. And I know we've got a number of legislators and BESI members who are interested in what needs to happen legislatively to address the issue of truancy. So I'm trying to distill from y'all's conversation some specific recommendations that we can bring back to you all at the next meeting for here's what this group wants to recommend be considered legislatively and in policy. So one thing that I've written down so far is you all are interested in policy, and I think for it to apply to charter, it would need to happen legislatively too, regarding the role of and response to parent notes. What can be excused via a note? When can that note be accepted? And then one thing that I'm hearing from the discussion is, and that it's making me think of, is we don't necessarily want to dictate the decision, but the decision making. And so it sounds like we may want to require that some sort of school level team be established that can function as this. And I know that a lot of schools are doing this already, but possibly it's something we would want to require across the board. And then maybe that school level team could serve as not only looking at what interventions should be established at the varying tiers, but whenever you get to whatever number of parent notes we want to accept, at that point, that school level team would be in place already. And we would provide guidance for that team for how to facilitate that decision-making process. So am I capturing that correctly? That maybe we wouldn't want to say like, this is the decision that team would make, but since they're the ones closest to the student, at whatever prompting point we decide needs to be there, someone at that school level is going to look at that situation, gather more information about the student and say, here, what we think should be the next steps. Did I capture that accurately so far?
Okay, wait. All right, we have two hands.
We gotta come at it from a charter perspective. Your problem with what you just said, it's a great idea. But now you're gonna be adding an 8th, 9th, 10th team that's required by Bessie. And when you're at the charter school with 500-600 kids, you don't have enough staff to man all
Well,
these different.
what if you have a team that's already in place that can do this?
Wouldn't child already be doing that? SBLC.
Yeah.
SBLC should be.
That can be, yeah. Yeah. It's the same team.
You have to do child find. So if you're already finding children for the active, he said, adding in attendance, behavior, social emotional, it's the same team, it's the same people.
Yeah.
It should be, it's here.
And practically speaking, yes, but in theory, yes. But when you apply it, that's not how you're talking about.
What?
Not gonna let Mr. King speak.
We're gonna do it this team. But that team is doing SPED, 504. Now you're throwing attendance and we got this other.
But it should be done in conjunction at the same time. Right?
Yes.
It's not another thing that's added on top of it, but it.
I mean, for example, what we're all talking about right here, I do it.
Yeah.
I'm the head leader of the school and I do it. And I really don't have time to do it, but I'm the one who does.
So yes, so I agree. You should not be doing that as the leader of the school, but this SBLC team should have this attendance as a part of what they're doing with the SBLC. It should just be another look, I hate to say it like a checkbox, but.
To give to the SBLC.
But when you look at the other things that the SBLC team is doing, you're gonna have people say, I don't want to do this. And I also want you to think about this too, because there's an all-encompassing approach here. So they're gonna do, most times, especially in a small school setting, this is gonna be done after school. So you now have a new law that just passed by the legislature that says, if these people are required to do anything outside, it's their, you got to pay them their hourly rate based on it. So now you're giving an unfunded mandate to the tune of anywhere from $50 to $60 an hour per person that's sitting there that's not a non-exempt employee.
That's true. Miss Smith,
Yeah,
Okay.
that's the legislature, that law just passed.
He's saying after school.
Miss
They're doing it
Smith,
after school.
okay, let's hear some comments related. Wait, just start again for me.
So that, I see it be a part of the duties of that team to consider the parent. And that would eliminate anything outside if you already have school-based attendance team, if you don't, then it's something one consider.
But what I hear, that's what I'm trying to explain. In your case, in EBR, that works great. What's the average size of your school? When you're talking about a school with 500 kids and 35 employees.
Yeah.
And we've got to worry about this legislatively mandated or a Bessie mandated team and this one, you don't have enough people. And so you're going to have, you're not going to be able to do it within school. You have to do it at school and you're going to have to pay, as opposed to when larger schools, take a larger elementary school in EBR. You've got all these little ancillary programs in your elementary schools that not only benefit the exposure to the kids of being a more well-rounded individual, but you've got all these people that provide these opportunities to have this team of teachers associated with some APs as well, where they meet once a week during school or once a month. You do not have that environment in your rural districts and in your charter schools
true.
that are smaller. So what you're gonna be doing is unintentionally creating an unfunded mandate against these schools that are running tight budgets as it is.
Ms. Francis?
Do you currently have SBLC? So I'm wondering, like, how do you have SBLC in my jurisdiction?
So I currently have SBLC, we call it a SAT team. It's not SBLC, it's a SAT team. But that's the team that's getting together, meeting, determining, academic interventions and stuff like that. But you gotta check, but attendance, you're right at first, but then when you start chasing that attendance thing down, you're going in a whole different road. And so it's not as cut and dried as you're making.
Well,
It's
it's
not
I'm
like
just
a
thinking
capacity
it's an issue,
issue.
not a.
It is a capacity, that's exactly what I'm saying. It is a
It's a
capacity
capacity
issue.
issue.
Yeah, but I just think like schools are legally responsible to do SBLC. That's all, am I wrong? Is that's already in, like, you have to do that. And so I guess it's confusing to me because it should already, yeah, I think that that's what it should be. It's like it should be a definition or a policy that says these have to include these things, even if it's running the data and grouping them like we talked about, the kids that are coming, checking in early, the kids that are leaving, are coming, checking in late, leaving early, not coming, and then different, even if it's that. I mean, I've worked at 2 different schools that ran SBLC pretty rough, but we still, like, it's still something that you have to do. So I feel like to me,
So we're not gonna define the school level team.
yeah.
Right.
So,
I
yeah.
think
We're not gonna
we could leave
define the school level
composition-
team.
We could leave that composition of that team very open, and something
Yeah.
else I'm hearing you say is there
It
might
could
be
be 2 people.
opportunity to look at how to consolidate the functions. We did that this year in legislation when we look at the titles of student level plans that are required in response to lots of academic deficits, and we were able to consolidate some of those plan titles. So instead of having an individual reading improvement plan and an individual literacy improvement plan and an individual academic improvement plan, could you have the plan? And then, and so there's a possibility that we also could look at team functions for that too. And if there's some possibilities to consolidate plan functions, because the important thing is that you have people at the school level looking at student needs and deciding what needs to happen next. So maybe we can help alleviate some of
And
the.
can I make one more recommendation? Is it possible that we can look at EdLink and look at the two-way synchronization that doesn't happen right now? Because in EdLink, I love going in EdLink and looking at the chronic absenteeism, the schools that the kids, it's really, to me, once we get it up and running and it's consistent, a great system. The issue is the data is going in, but if a kid moves to another school or district, the data should be able to come back to me to provide me with the information that I need. That's not happening.
Okay, so in the essence of time, I'm gonna hear from Ms. Maneri, and then we do need to move on because there's other topics on the agenda that we want to get your input on. But we're gonna take this information so that when we come back to you all in the fall, I want to say in September, then we'll have some recommendations for you all to hear from that how we want to move forward, either with policy or legislation. Ms. Maneri?
But it should be on everything. It should be under PIS, it should be under SBLC, it should be in everything you do. And it doesn't really make sense to move it to a separate team. It really should be a part of everything you do. If you don't integrate it into everything you do, your kids aren't there, you're not getting anywhere, and you're not improving anything. So what's the point? So if you're gonna make a mandate for a policy, the policy should be that you're looking at attendance in every plan.
Right,
Gotcha.
especially SBLC.
Okay, okay,
As parents and say family, once you get this policy and guidance and figure that big piece out, I would love to have a standardized form that I fill out for the parent code, instead of me just scribbling on this paper and having no idea. You just add
that's why we have parents on this thing. All right, so I want to thank you all for your robust conversation. We got a lot of notes between Ashley, myself, and my people over here. And I know she's just bursting at the seams.
She just won't let me go.
No. But we're gonna, again, take this information, come back to you all with it in the fall, so we can have some solid recommendations that we need for policy as well as possibly legislation. Okay. So we're gonna go on to the next item on the agenda, which is a consideration of an update report regarding Project Truancy. Do I have a motion to receive the report? Ms. Francis moves that we receive the report, seconded by Dr. Davis and Judge Grover. It's up, you can sit and let's talk, that's it.
Thanks for this opportunity to share in the space. And the conversation that we had, I thought just a little bit and complicated dynamic, but hearing your conversation and such good points and the diversity that occurs around our state, it's no wonder that our parents and our students have a hard time navigating and knowing which way is up in many cases. And so in the overlay of what we're doing in EDR system, I'm going to cut to the chase part and maybe hopefully this kind of value that I have. We have a layer and multifaceted way of approaching truancy and chronic absence in EDR. One of the things that's important to me as I look at how we address that, is not forgetting the context in which lays the foundation on how to do this work and why we're doing this work the way that we're doing it in EDR parish. Noting that the work of truancy and pilot programs have, from my research back, since 1994, and I became involved in this system as a whole in 1998. And so being able to see some of the evolution of how we got here and what needs to be done is very interesting because it's an ebb and flow. Sometimes it's that because of change in leadership, sometimes it's because of policy changes, sometimes it's because of capacity and resources. But I do see that there's an ebb and flow. And when we started to approach some of the processes that we have now, is because we were tipping up 54% or more with truancy. I'm talking truancy, though most of the conversation, it should be that 10% that we're talking about with chronic absence, but the framework in context in real time speaking is because we have focusing on truancy. And so right now, bringing it fast forward from that, looking at data, look at what has been done and the ebb and flow of what and who and how things have been done. Right now, we have at least 4 separate school systems in EDR parish, in addition to the multiple charter schools, virtual schools. There's just so much that one way of approaching it is just not practical. And so I'm glad to see that in our parish, there are strong pockets who have stepped up to say that we need to do something. And Baker, Ms. Adams talked about that. I'm so glad that what's going on in Baker of school system because it shares some light on what could happen in other places. And they are small enough that they could work out the tweaks and develop something that is sound and sturdy and that can be used as quote unquote evidence based. And so if it fits you, then that could work. And much of what has been said, it's also layered in some of the other things that are going on. In our EDR parish school system, we have our task of truancy assessment center. And my knowledge is that every community doesn't have a task that can step in at tier 3 interventions, and of those schools who need more attention. And they have recently been relocated under our district attorney's office, which gives them more stability and more functionality as well. Our district attorney's office helped to fund our informal truancy court. So we have someone closed in Black Road, but it's not for punitive, it's to actually help as a tool and a resource for our task for those schools who need a little bit more attention. In addition, we have our business community and our school collaborating and meeting quarterly at least, and sometimes more than that, who are contributing to big decisions like superintendent, expressing what it is that we want a new superintendent or a new whatever to focus on truancy and absenteeism. When you bring the business world into this area, and it does have a relation because if our communities are not educated, then our workforce is impacted and our income for our state, because those individuals will leave. right? And so there's a big picture on how business community should be at the table when we're talking about education and how that's happening. And it's happening in EBR Parish. They were the impetus or this collaboration between business and school and other systems is one of the reasons that we have Everyday Lab, who's able to facilitate and justify bringing that in and the expenditure by our school board to do that. That is a heavy voice. If communities aren't using their business partners, then they are missing out on a key stakeholder, especially for schools who might be smaller or communities might be smaller. You still have a business community that can come in and to help facilitate that in ways that would be helpful for the school system. And so I'm glad we're leaning into that. In addition, and I won't go into Everyday Labs because I know that it's in several communities, but when we talk about messaging, parents, I did want to bring out just a couple of things that's occurring with that I'm excited about seeing, using the MTSS, but also making this touch with our families through our mail and text nudges, and how that is occurring, because communication and building relationships is where we start with bringing our young people. And so from January, as of yesterday, we had over 190,000 text nudges to families that are within that school system. Mail nudges, over 124,000 touches with our students. We have 41,000 students within that system. And so these are double and triple touches to some of these families. Check-in texts, almost 40,000 to our families. And for those who are chronically absent or at risk of being so, almost 60,000 touches to say the messages that are applied to Everyday Lab. And I think what is really important with that piece, and I'm excited to see if we can carry this forward and then look at the data as needed going through these stages, that the attendance nudges, they really do address the misconceptions that parents might have. For instance, underestimating the total days of absences by their students. I mean, because we're counting, but they're not home putting a dash mark on a refrigerator and saying, I'm at my 5, I'm at my 10, I've sent 6 letters. They're not doing that. And so their perception of their students attending school may not be as accurate as I've seen it in court. I didn't realize, I didn't know those responses. In addition, underestimating the link between attendance and the academic progress, of really not putting those two together, that is very difficult for our students to perform at a higher, and when I say at their full potential, because I don't know what a higher rate is for a student, but whatever the potential that they were born with and can be nurtured and developed, we want them to reach that. And parents might not be connecting that, and those nudges are helping to address that. And family believing that attendance is average or better than average. And their students, they're doing pretty good. They know that they're absent, but they're in the ballpark of what everyone else is doing. Well, some of these mail nudges are really visual. So our parents who aren't as literate and can read and interpret and comprehend what is being said, average putting a bar and saying your student is here can help them really put in perspective as to what is happening with their students. So those are really innovative ways on communicating to families versus just sending a letter, right, to tell them that these are the consequences of your student not attending. And then included in that are resources where parents are actually directed or providing opportunity to locate resources that are available to address some of those needs. There were over 4,000 connections with resources and information within their texts and their phones. And so those resources, including transportation, language, wellness, food, enrollment, housing, those things that are sometimes a barrier or a driver to actually get them. And so I am very excited about what we are seeing initially with everyday labs in our community, working through that business, and we get those updates, those business and schools collaboration. Parents can opt out. And so we wanted to know, well, how many are opting out? Leave it alone. I don't want to get all of this. There was for the male 0.12%. So we were finding that they were receptive when an opportunity to opt out and not opting out speaks volume. And for text messages, 2.5%. So it's higher, but it's still low. Parents, caretakers are interested in their students. And they are receiving the communication because they want the communication because they're not opting out. And I think that is an awesome place for us to start. Everyday Lab also addresses our staff engagement, how that looks when we're engaging our staff and giving them the tools that doesn't make it as onerous as it can be when we start talking about staff engagement. Does that mean a meeting? You know, and it doesn't have to mean that. And so Everyday Labs gives us an opportunity to hone in on that as well. What I did want to say is that also that there was a 57% rate decrease or improvement. I did a positive improvement after receiving these nudges. That when identified, when nudged, that the behavior that precipitated the nudge has decreased, the ebb and flow. And what we want is for it to trend down. When I started looking at the next thing that's going on in EBR, and where I spent my last couple of minutes, is that attendance truancy was 54%. With some work that we actually started in 2019 on getting the courts involved, because there's nothing more frustrating than to have a child and a family in front of you without options. You know, you sign a notice and just come back. But we've not really done anything. And 54% and trending higher for our parish was concerning. With some of the work of the collaboration of the business and schools, but it would be more importantly, systems and community. Because community wants to be involved in improving our students' outcomes. Not just business, but the neighbors, the nonprofits, community cares. But they need to know how and when they can get and be a part of the school system with, you know, everyone will tell you you're so close. You know, no one can come in. And so it's hard to be that for a community. And so when we started what is now the truancy, high school truancy docket report, it was for those most egregious cases. That's where we started. And we wanted the community to be available, but I think also we wanted accountability. That absenteeism and truancy was not all to be laid on the head of a student or a family. Hearing the conversation in this room says that that is true. That systems play a role in the success of our students and our families being in. This is a hard thing to navigate. And we're not on one accord on what that should look like, right? And so for parents who are dealing with other issues and things, yes, they're making decisions, but their decisions are not isolated and removed from the decisions that we are making as systems. There's an impact. And so when we started the truancy court, it was to improve the attendance and educational outcomes, not just get kids back into schools. Because what school and how, what does that look like? It was the educational environment that we needed them to return and reconnect to, and it was the educational outcomes. And to also for me is this managing the school to prison pipeline. Because when I started this work, we had that year before actually starting in 2018, there were 41 FINS cases for our whole parish. And that included ungovernable, runaway, truancy, all of what's eligible for FIN. but yet we had high delinquency. So where are our children? We have over a 50% truancy rate. They're not in fins or coming to court. They're not showing up anywhere. But I bet you there is some crossover in delinquency. And it's true that kids come into court with delinquency, and we track that. There was a school issue as well. Of attendance or behavior, there was something connected with a high percentage with school, but we weren't doing anything with that. And so with us bringing the students most egregious, because you all are doing the tier 1, tier 2 interventions. And those, whether it's everyday lab and we're sending things out to touch families, for the court system, we need to be as responsible as well for trying to be on interventions. But we can't step into your world, and we can't go out in the street and step into theirs, but our community needs. Our community should have access to our schools. They have access to our families, and the courts belong to them. And so how do we make all of that work together? And so with our truancy court, there is a process by which if a family ends up or a child ends up in front of us, and being mindful that FANS is a family in need of services, it's not just the youth that's in need of services. So it allows the court to address all family issues that makes the family, quote unquote, by law, dysfunctional. Then we can actually be that extra tool for the school system. And so we do have our public defender, because an attorney cannot be waived for a kid who has a thin petition. It cannot be waived. And we have our prosecutor, but we also have TAPS. We also have TWA that appears at court on every setting. And if the child has been referred to the community for mentoring, or whether services with truth, those entities are invited to participate as well. So when parents and students have issues, the court has a way of calling into question those who are in attendance, not just to point fingers, but to problem solve and then find a way to correct that behavior so that the student can begin. I've had cases where we've had 4 individuals from the Department of Education to attend, as well as 2 or 3 from East Baton Rouge Parish Administration, as well as parents, and it's like a whole courtroom full of people for one child, because it's important. With that child, but also for systems to see how they are working or not working together, so that maybe we don't come back with that piece. And so we have collected data on what is being done with our truancy court and how that overlays and layer with what's doing at tier 1 work and tier 2 work. And so as we're thinking about going forward on what we need, different partners are needed at different tier levels. And so I'm hoping what we're doing here at EBR gives us a map of seeing that we are working at the right place. Businesses are where they should be, community is also a part of it, and families feel like they are part of the solution and they are part of their students' education, and it's bigger than their student just walking in the door of a school. It's they're walking in their community in which they live, which they play, and in which they grow. And so at least I think we've seen a lot of parents change their perception on whether schools are out to get them. Because a lot come in and they are guarded. They are guarded. And we have seen where they have actually laid down the gloves and said, thank you. How many have mouthed thank you, and how students have, and we've seen graduations of students. I enjoy getting the pictures, because they will send pictures with cap and gown that I hang on my wall, because we are working 1 at a time while you are working 5, 10,000 at a time in some places. But it does offer for a layered system to address all of these. Any questions? I will please ask those questions that haven't through my slides.
Any questions? right, thank you so much for sharing. Oh,
And that's the questions.
Yes, I've had, a couple of, our judicial conferences where presentations, because we have to develop forms we've created with the help of our partners that are here, flow processes on how things flow, this and that. And so I have shared some of those things, and some of the other judges are doing some really great things. I think it's just bringing in businesses and community to actually participate in the proceedings, so parents don't leave and have to go call someone. Right, when they leave, they have they know the faces. We ask the CWA, introduce yourself to this family. In our attendance improvement plan, because we do set a plan and they come to court once a month for 3 months to get an update on their plan. And it's not just them giving an update, but if someone else had a responsibility to follow up with transportation, then we do that. If I need to bring a transportation supervisor in, then we do that. So that they know that it's a team to get the child back in. And so we have shared our flow chart with that in our rural forums as well.
I will say, with school nurse defense conference, just talking to everybody else, people are very jealous of what we have in Baton Rouge, but that with our partnerships. Work in progress.
And I'm gonna beat the dead horse again, right? How do we standardize these actions for the judges, the district attorneys, the social services across the state? Because we keep saying we want to make it fair for all kids. It's the same policies and procedures wherever you go. Then how do we make sure that this is what we need from support for the judges? These are the steps. Because I know in Orleans Parish, I'm listening to what you say, we wish we had that. So again, how are we valued on what truancy is here to here in this district if the supports and the judges are doing different things to support attendance in our schools?
Well, I always say that the law is the maximum of what is done before legal action can be taken, but it is not where we should start.
Right, what's the process? We need a standardized
That's
process.
where for judicial, that thinking is no different than when we think about delinquency. You know, it's when a crime happens that the legal system becomes involved, but we have a responsibility to do something before a victim is created.
Right, yeah. And even I know in Orleans, we were referring kids to FENS at 15 days. So when I looked at FENS and other districts and parishes and cities, it's at 5, it's at 7. So again, where is the standardization? So, and if you don't have FENS, what do we need to support from LDOE's level to make sure, or from legislation, that is something that's an option?
well, and I think that is where we go back to the MTSS part, is we make sure that everybody understands those tier 1 interventions are critical.
Mm-hmm.
That's where we start. And if somewhere is not using those tier 1 interventions, I'm not gonna name a place because somebody might get offended. But if some place Louisiana is not using tier 1 interventions, so this is where the team here needs to go out and make sure they understand how important that is. And maybe they can show how those tier 1 interventions have been implemented in this place, Louisiana, and how this place and any place are very similar on paper. They're both maybe rural communities. They both have this type of population, and it has worked in any place. So why can't it work in this place? So that's one thing that we can try to implement here at the state level without any kind of policy changes that need to be made. It's just good practice in that we're trying to implement those tier 1 interventions so we don't have to get to that tier 3.
And then I mean, I just want to say, Judge Rover, she has been, I mean, a godsend in this work. With EPR and other parishes and district systems that are, but when I listen to you, Ms. Monero, and you say, how can we do this? How can we implement this in another place? Would it be beneficial for Judge Rover? I'm offering you up. Have an event where she is meeting and sharing what's happening in EPR with judges around the state.
And what you have to remember too with each ordinance is autonomous. Right? And so, although I've spoken with a couple of judges there and they're interested, it's still the judges individually sometimes have barriers on doing it as a standard, but what I say is that a courtroom handle a set of kids
Mhm.
that deserve that attention, so whether it's collectively or that, that the court house, it happens, and it does, in progress, the safest place to be is results.
Mhm.
Safest place for a leader is on the foundation of results. And when you have the results, they will come. And so sometimes you just have to put in that, just do what you do and let the results speak for themselves. And they will come. And I say that with EBR Parish because we just started with the EBR Parish school system. And then we were getting calls from Baker. And we're saying we're juvenile court for the parish. Of course, you can participate. And we got in Baker, and so now Baker deep off because you're doing what you're doing. But we got Zachary with some kids. We got Central, I've got kids from Green Road Springs. I've got the virtual school who don't have a brick and mortar, but they are calling.
Mhm.
And so when we have our monthly meetings, because this group does have a collaborative meeting once a month to still troubleshoot what we're doing. Now the Zoom screen is full, because we have the charter schools coming. Everyone wants to handle this issue and we're working together, and the community partners are also there. Big Buddy is there, Power 225 is there. So everybody's at one place trying to figure this out together.
Oh, thank you for sharing. Did you have one last comment before we move on?
And we have kind of like a checklist, but even before it gets to the judge, our district attorneys are vital in this security process. Key. And that can say whether or not the family comes or the family does not come. And I'm sorry.
So what I hear as a potential recommendation coming out of this is mainly just kind of maybe writing up a model program, kind of like what's going on here, and maybe, putting that out as guidance, and we know that it may not be able to take place because I hear what you're saying about the court and each court is individual, but we have this guidance out there and we start with not the punitive, but the positive and looking at how we can help that student from the start.
I think that lets us have conversations too.
Absolutely.
We're the agency that go to the district attorney's office. Like, we're not trying to explain something why we're like, what Judge Burger's doing.
Yeah.
And then as a free, can start a conversation.
But also making sure that we know what's the minimum requirement, because then we need to look at the legislative package, because maybe not stands for everybody, but something similar. And that becomes the legislative push that we can do to make sure that everybody has something similar.
It could be the last resort.
Because
Yes.
it does.
All right, one last comment before we move on to the next thing on the agenda.
That was say something brought up, the fact that there is a test bins everywhere.
Right.
That's a recommendation that we come from here. If we know that that's likely to here.
It's working.
That'll be very helpful so that we're not seeing it for employees having those intentions, but we know that they're not accessible in all employees.
Mhm.
How can we make a recommendation?
All right, so we will move on to the next thing on the agenda, which is consideration of a discussion regarding career exploration and extracurricular activities as it relates to attendance. So do I have a motion to receive this discussion? Mr. Kane? Ms. Austin, thank you. And I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Townsend.
Good morning again. At the Bessie meeting last week, Mr. Morris made a motion to add this item to the agenda. And so just a little bit of background, previously in our accountability system, there's an interest and opportunities indicator. And one of the things that came through in conversation was you're really giving points for something that is already required. And so that was revisited, different topic, different day. But for these purposes, we really thought about where is that important as it relates to student attendance? Because there are lots of cases where students feel like school isn't relevant for them. Students feel like school isn't something that they need to do to put them in a better position to be successful later in life. School maybe isn't interesting or engaging. And so looking at, should anything be required statewide for that tier 1 level, those universal things, like, is there a requirement that should be in place for schools to offer enrichment or career exploration activities? So we were interested in your thoughts on that. Currently, statute requires that middle schools incorporate activities that expose students to career and technical as well as academic fields of study. So 6 activities, which could include field trips, guest speakers, community services, et cetera. 6 activities are supposed to be conducted in 6th grade, in 7th grade, and in 8th grade. And so the idea of these is to expose students to, here's some things that you could be when you grow up. Here's some fields that are in our area. Maybe partner with some businesses and industry partners in your area to say, hey, here are some of the different career options, different jobs that are just in our facility here, different things you could explore. And then at middle school, students could start be thinking about, where do I fit in and what do I want to be when I grow up? So then in high school, that can help both inspire them to get through those required courses, those core and foundational courses, and then start selecting some opportunities for career and tech ed courses, advanced college courses, things like that, that could help propel them to what they decide that they want to do after high school. So that's one requirement. And then we have the individual graduation plans that are required right now that schools make with students to help them look each year at, am I on track to doing what I want to do after high school? Is my scheduling setting me up for success with that? So that's a requirement right now. And then some enrichment requirements are in place. Schools are required to offer foreign language beginning with 4th grade, physical education, art, music. There's not really a requirement to offer extracurricular activities. So a lot of schools do have sports, but as far as those extra clubs and things that can promote civic engagement or beta club or youth government club, those things happen a lot of times because schools like them and students like them. But I think maybe there's some opportunity to discuss what the role of those things is in encouraging student attendance and encouraging students to remain engaged in school. So we were just interested in the thoughts of this group on that topic.
You bring that out in the context of, in order to participate, you have to have this level of attendance or using some other method.
I guess my question is, do you all think that Bessie and LDOE should prioritize career exploration and enrichment offerings in our approach toward encouraging and improving student attendance? Like, do y'all, is that something that this group would recommend, that Bessie and LDOE should look at ways to prioritize these activities in middle school and in all the grades, really, I guess, as we move forward in supporting solutions? And do y'all have any thoughts or additions?
I think it might create opportunity for mentorship. That's what I was thinking about when Judge Gruber was talking about. Sometimes just having that exposure to someone outside of the school to be that voice in the ear that says, hey, if you want to do X, Y, Z, like attendance is important, like you need to be there. So it might build, a relationship or capacity to encourage, the parent and the student, what they might want to do once they. And I know sometimes, I recently heard about internships, some of our teams are participating in summer internships and these companies are paying them.
Yeah.
So it might even give an opportunity for them not to say, because currently I feel like some of the students don't come to school because they go to work, so that's a juggle sometimes as well, but it might give them an opportunity to say like, this is what you could potentially make when you get out. But for right now, like we're gonna encourage you to remain in school, and when you get out, we build that relationship. I think it's positive.
I think it's positive as well. I know Shamika shared in her monthly call maybe last month about, or maybe, I don't remember, we looked at Baker results, and this was the #1 reason kids didn't come to school, was that they don't really see it as being important, or they've made that decision, like, I don't value this, or it's not important, it's not relevant to my future. And so I think anything we can do to start early to just like plant seeds that it is important, give them opportunity, give them a way to see a future for themselves with whatever capacity, I think that's an addition and is positive. I obviously know there's logistical concerns, but I think that data shows us this is a big reason kids don't come to school. And then two, I think just working with kids, a lot of times it's very hard to emotionally to see it, have a kid see themselves out of negative situations. And the only way I think they do that is through exposure and experience.
I like it in terms of some of the incentivizing, kids for advocates. It's all like it in terms of that, because I'm thinking about so 6th, 7th, 8th grade, if they can get to high school, because internship and apprenticeship is going to be a part of
Accountability.
then having those potential partners look at, okay, we'll start looking at your 8th grade attendance and factoring that in terms of whether or not you have first dibs on some of these internship programs. And I think that would help kids, start to understand how important attendance is, because it correlates with, attendance in the workforce.
Right, and I don't think the DCFS side, we're seeing a lot of, we have the 14 to 17-year-olds who are preparing to transition out of foster care. They're not that interested in school and education, they just want to work. So this would be bridging that gap to allow them to see, hey, this is why it's important to attend school, prepare you for the job, so that they can have better skills for their aging out here, and also have a career that they're interested for. We're seeing like last week when I talked to one of them, all he wants to do is be a manager at Burger King. Well, you still have to go to school every day. You still have to work your job at Burger King, but it helped just gap that, filling that gap between I need to work to be able to take care of myself, but I also need this education to help me prepare to take care of my finances as well as other people.
Right.
And I think the earlier we have this conversation, it builds that conscience, like that type of.
It creates hope.
And it creates.
It creates hope.
It creates other pathways. A lot of times, I think people don't see the light bulb go off and do the basic when they're able to participate in careers fairs, when the school council promotes that in their school enrichment program, right? And then having those from the community come in and speak to them about those different things. And then that sparks pathways and conversations. So I think, yeah, that's, in the room or whatever, one thing saying like it's important to break that consciousness around the patterns that you create now, reflecting what you were doing in the workforce, like Dr. Simmons was saying. Like, I don't think there's a correlation with it. If you ain't gonna school, how you gonna go to.
True.
Should we look
Miss
for ways to
Maneri?
make them that below 6th grade?
Miss Manera?
I was a former principal at school, and we saw a dramatic increase that elementary school when we started doing extracurriculars. And I mean, we included everything we could think of, and we let the children come up with some ideas for their own extracurricular activities, like homework helper club and history club, and just random things that they wanted. And I know they wanted to come to school based on the fact that they knew that they knew the school, they were getting to stay after school to do those things. And we also utilize the community for sure in helping us with those clubs, but we also utilize the local high schools that can come in and help after school because we were staggered at time. And those kids lived for interacting with those other older kids. So extracurriculars definitely make a difference, and they can make a difference in elementary too, not just middle school and high school. So you want your kids to come to school, give them something that they can't get at home.
We should extend some of these below middle school.
Yeah. I think that probably one of the key to success in addition to just putting it there is that it be relevant, that this exploration and these activities are relevant to what the population, and we're still connecting it with absenteeism and truancy. So we want the whole entire school body to have this experience and this exposure. But if we're zoning in to especially touch that population of students who have demonstrated truancy and absenteeism, that whatever those activities are relevant. Because even when you ask the students to participate, if it's the truant kid, he's not even there to contribute to the conversation about what I want to see. And so, and I think that's the key. A lot of times before, when we took out certain classes in schools, that led to trade work.
Right.
Then we really, a segment of students then didn't see education relevant. Because the one thing that they really enjoyed and they got to use their
kinesthetic learning. Yeah.
So when you have the activities and it's just an intellect in all of them, but it is solely intellectual without those aspects to it, or it's not culturally sensitive to whatever that pocket is of students, then we'll have it on the books, but it won't be impacting truancy and absenteeism. And so we just need to make sure that we, you have a mechanic in there that's fixing cars, or a barber that's in there, something, a mixture, when you're talking about people coming in that we may not traditionally think, but if we want to capture the population that we are really trying to.
That we're losing.
Attendance on,
We have to be relevant. Needs assessment probably would be good, survey your population, just to find out like, where are they interested in? Because if we were gonna find these questions, then you said, gives us that data.
Well, and that, the tier one interaction, where you guys doing your SBLC or not doing your SBLC?
Mr. King.
No, we're doing this. No, I'm doing truancy by myself. My SBLC is doing other stuff. Let's make that perfectly clear.
Some way, I mean, even with that.
I agree.
Everyone can be involved, even with the board. I'm always thinking, how can we help? We can't do it, but we can help. Is that when families come in, there is nothing to whether we working on a kiosk, it's like computers. They'll do that. So let's go where they go, meet them where they are, right? But having them come in, that can be a part of the process that we have. Okay, you have to pick 3 things you wanted to do when you are grown and can take care of yourself. What would it be? And that's there's many ways of capturing that data, but at least I know I'm going to have them where you may not have them in school. I have this one. So get the information and build that, distribute to some extent, make sure that all boards are.
I think the business connection too, you were saying that earlier, like connecting businesses back into the school to understand what this school experience is like, what kids are doing, and then having kids see that. Like, I think a lot of times we think this adds things to the school's plate, but businesses do these types of programming. They have outreach programming. So if you have planning in the summer, like you're saying, like, what do we need to do? What did it tell us last year? Okay, the first month of the school, we're going to plan what's going to come the rest of the time and have businesses that are already doing this. It's not like recreating the wheel. Yeah.
That's why I'm glad that you guys pointed out that career exploration can start early. I did the presentation on how kindergarten is not an option, it's an opportunity, because data has shown that when the activities are relevant and career exploration early can actually increase attendance. What we do know is those family assessments, those needs assessments you talked about, those weren't effective. That's how we found out the population we were serving. So that we could do relevant interventions that actually showed that we were listening to their voices. At the end of the day, we still have to remember student and family voice in this work. Because again, our families are our gatekeepers, right? Kindergarten didn't decide they're not going to school. Someone is helping them make that conscious decision. And so when we talk about extracurricular activities, I like that she was able to do a school assessment. What are some things that are relevant to you guys so that we can create some extracurriculars around your interests? Because again, when they have a voice in it, they take ownership of it and they want to take care of it. They want to continue to be a part of it, just like Judge Rover shared, that you do have the truant kid that isn't going to be there. That's why I often share our CWAs. When you do a home visit, we live in the South, you don't go empty-handed. You go with resources, but we also go equipped with, well, school isn't for me. Did you know that this pathway exists? We go with understanding what pathways are out there. I literally just had a great conversation with the Army, because what I've shared with them is you actually should have all pathways. You should actually consider being mentors in some of the schools. Kids only know you when you're getting ready to deploy. How about you show us what other things that are out there? Like I learned for the first time, going on the National Educators Tour, that the musicians that are in the Army, that's their job. Yeah. They're not doing this. So if I find a student that can't get a scholarship to play their instrument, guess what? You have another option. You have another opportunity. But you still need to be in school But because when you're in school, you can get this information for more opportunities. Everybody know I have my hashtags. Hashtag we got options. So let me help you explore your options. And it does help with attendance because they understand that if I can just get to school, someone is going to assist. Someone's gonna make sure I have the right information.
Right, thank you all for that robust discussion. I think we got some great notes there as well. I want to get to our last item on the agenda in our last 20 minutes because I want to get you all out on time. So the last thing is an update report on our task force recommendations. Can I have a motion to receive this report? Ms. Sims? I don't know, who seconded? Oh, Dr. Davis. And so this is going to get back to our discussion about where we should be going with our definitions. And there's another comment that Dr. Clark has regarding parent notes that we're going to get to as well. And so what we provided you all with one of the handouts, it has revised statute 17233. And that it kind of tells you exactly where truancy is defined in the statute. And it is, a student shall be considered habitually absent or habitually tardy when either condition continues to exist after all reasonable efforts by any school personnel, truancy officer, or other law enforcement personnel have failed to correct the condition after the fifth unexcused absence or fifth unexcused occurrence of being tardy within the school semester. So that is how it is stated in statute. We equate it to what you see on the screen. It's the same thing. 5 unexcused absences or 5 unexcused tardies within the semester. So that's truancy. And then of course we have our numbers. My slide is off because I had to convert it to PowerPoint. So it's kind of off on the screen, but you can see the percents right under each year. So from 2019 to 2020, we were at 28%. By 22-23, we were at 42% truant across the state. These are state numbers. And we know, of course, what happened during that period of time, the pandemic, and, we're still living the effects of the pandemic. So that had a lot to do with that. But we can get to a lower number. We can get to 28% because in 1920, that was well before we were at that point. And so it just has risen over time. So we have to think about how is it that we are better able to support our schools. And I say schools because that's where it starts. Not at the system level, it starts at that school level with the people who are closest to the student and making sure they are there. And going back to that first item on our agenda is having possibly some attendance teams that are looking at this particular data to see where students are. So, if we have so many students being tardy and they're all coming off of Oak Street, what is happening on Oak Street in that area? Is it a bus? I mean, is it a train that's blocking them from getting to the school? Is it a red light? Is it a traffic situation where it's just the light, it just takes so long to get through that light, no matter what time that parent leaves to get to school, they're just not getting there on time. So that's what we hope that those attendance teams will do. And then we look at chronic absence. Look at that definition. It's not defined in Louisiana law anywhere, but this is what we do. 15 or more absences for any reason, excused, unexcused, or suspensions. They're counted once at the state level, once per school system, and once per site. Now we have a recommendation of how we should define it. Chronic absence across many places are defined as 10% or more of the academic school year for any reason. So that's a recommendation that we should think about. There is a report that's going to be coming out next week from Attendance Works that has like a state scan. So I encourage you, we'll try and send that out. It won't be out until the 25th. We'll try and send that out to you all so you can look at that report, and it provides a really good overview of recommendations of what should be occurring across the states. So that's a really good report. So just thinking about what we just talked about, actually this entire time that we've been together today, what are some recommendations that you all feel that are considerations for policy or for statute that we should be looking at, we should be addressing at the BESI level as well as at the legislative level? Don't get quiet on me now.
How do y'all feel about the 5 days?
With the truancy, at 5 days, I know some states are 10 days, so. Can that be in consideration to raise it to 5?
So 5 is too soon, is what you think, for truancy. For truancy purposes. For truancy purposes, 5 unexcused absences in a semester is
So it's
too.
10 a year. We have 10 a year.
We have 10 a year, so what,
The high school level, you know, it starts over. 5 high school level, yeah. Well, I'm suggesting that 5 is too soon.
Mhm.
10.
10 for a semester or 10 for the year? So 10 for a semester, that's a consideration we can make, okay? Ms. Francis?
States around.
Mhm.
So let me ask about 10 for high school level, because at that point, you've gotten into seat time issues at 10 days, and at 20, they're receiving an F.
So when we talk about seat time, we also, but that's the reason why we focus on the chronic absence. Because if we focus, I know we have a definition for truancy. But if we only are running into truant, we're gonna have kids that are missing a lot of school, but it's excused. You have to see, how can we look at chronic absence and look at truancy, but also we're looking at it in a way where kids are not missing too much school, and we're prioritizing in a way we're catching kids early. I understand what she's saying, because if we push it out to 10, we're still gonna catch them through chronic absence.
Early.
Which means that we're not going to clog up resources that aren't needed if we're engaging families early. And if we're working on all absences, because again, we can have some kids that will negate truancy, but still miss a whole lot of school. And so that, I don't want to shift the conversation, because we do need to focus on a new definition for truancy. I love that idea. I just want us to be mindful of why we want to see it that way. Because the goal isn't, we just want to make sure they're excused. The goal is, we want to make sure that we're decreasing the amount of absences that are happening.
Should we start with that parent note though, because if it's 5 or 10, whatever, we also have to factor in how many days are we gonna allow to be excused by parent note, because that can make it 15 or 20. So shouldn't we start with the excusal piece first? How many days do we want to say for a parent, for an excusal with a parent note?
You have a comment?
And then just a thought to frame the conversation as well, that designation of truancy is where it has to move from the school system level up to that next level. And do we think that's the appropriate place for that to happen?
And that's where my conversation would be, if this revised statute, what you want to look at with the statute is what are the consequences?
Mhm.
And if that
And it's
that we are looking for, that's when we know, okay, this is what we want to apply. And here, it would trigger, at 5, it triggers you to do something, right? And realistically, it says what you should do is refer that to the legal system. And is that what Bill has a community of educators that you need to do? And because if you trigger it to the court system, then it tells me that I start finding families who are already, trapped. And it says that I start giving parents community service to not only get your kids in school, but then go in here and do 25 hours of community service. It allows me to place you to incarcerate you. So these are the consequences.
Yeah.
For that far in, but if you're focusing on absenteeism, then, because law doesn't allow me to deal with absenteeism.
Yeah.
So it's 2 different pathways, and if you're doing that piece, because you're always going to be behind the ball. I would think almost every school in our state is not referring to kids who couldn't handle it at
Oh,
5.
Absolutely, they're not.
And also
Yeah.
consider elementary truancy and absenteeism is different from high school absentee and truism. Because a lot of times when I'm listening, I'm hearing more of the elementary mentality where parents are in control of you going to school or not going to school. In high school, it is totally different. And I think we just have to make sure that we're considering that piece too.
Where lawyers make their money is qualifiers and the modifiers of action, right? And so when you say money excuse, that's where we find the gray and you start tussling what's excused and unexcused, even in trials,
Right.
you know.
That is very
that's
true.
what it's be. And so you just need to think realistically as to what the outcome is that we really want to address.
Because we're talking about creating a new school or system level action before it gets to you all. And so if you think about it, we've got this required parent note at 3 days, whether that should be the same thing or not. Possibly some flexibility built in there based on parent written notes. And then after that, we're talking about establishing a chronic absence definition with an action that happens at the school or system level whenever the child reaches that designation. And so then possibly beyond that, we would want that truancy designation to happen because then it would get referred outside of the school system to that next level.
Ms. Francis?
With the 10% going to housing, so I'm thinking about even though chronic absenteeism covers everything in attendance. I'm thinking about a kid who may get sick and having to sort of hospital that exceeds that 10%. And so and they're still actively.
That's extenuating. So they would fall under extenuating.
But it's still, what she's
It's
saying.
still a part of chronic absenteeism.
It's still a part of chronic
Yeah.
absence, so it would still be factored into the numbers that we provide to the USDOE.
But what I'm asking is, are we putting it into the law to where it has a consequence?
So with chronic absence, it's not about a consequence, it's an actual intervention. And so
So
what
as
we
long
can,
as it's an intervention, I'm
That's
okay.
what
That's
we
I'm
can-
trying to.
Yeah,
figure
it's-
out.
yeah.
that's the reason why we have
It's-
set up with the.
it's not punitive.
Because we're leaning towards away from the punitive side. Truancy is the punitive side.
We want to get away from that.
And so we want to focus on all absences. So if I have a child that's chronically absent due to sickness or illness, we are already engaged with that family to find out what supports can we provide. We're already putting in our SIS that this child will be out for this amount of time. And we'll probably meet with our SBLC to find out, could this qualify for homebound services? Because we want to continue to keep this child engaged.
That's what we're finding important when we have those with medical reasons of not attending, is that there are medical reasons that are in depth. And so we start looking at where's the appropriate educational environment, because that kid still has a right to be educated. And so we start looking for those other pathways, which is why we never say it's returning back to your school, it's to put you in an educational environment.
Ms.
Where the
Lanier?
policy might need to change is the part about NTSS, and just like in academics, where the policy forces the school head to do the interventions, we do not have the school being forced to do the intervention for attendance, and that's where the policy can really make a difference.
And then what happens in the cities like New Orleans, where ours may not always be medical or
Lack of medical attention. Ours is, they're at home and I'm not bringing. They're at Canes when I go there. So we also have to make sure that we have a policy in place for the different parishes on the different issues. And those issues exist, and those parents will tell you, they're only coming if you get us to court. Because I can't get them. So take us to court right now, because I need you to do that for me, for my kid. So we need to also make sure we, yeah. Yeah.
That's how I'm saying that we're, we don't want to get away from that, because we want to make sure that we
Right.
have accountability.
Right. And if I go to 10 or 15 days, I've lost that kid.
But we
For the
also
most
want
part.
to make sure that we're looking at chronic absence.
Yeah.
Because here's the thing, if I engage with families that is chronically absent, that's the first thing they tell me. I don't have to wait until they're truant to have a conversation with the next level.
Right.
I can actually say, this is now we've moved on to tier 2.
Mm-hmm.
And what needs to happen in tier 2, we find that same intervention that we put in place, it's still not working for that family. That still would move us to the next tier.
Right.
So it's not to get away from looking at all families. Again, when we utilize MTSS, we're looking at all kids. And we are counting those kids that are going to be, that are ungovernable or defiant. But we're also gonna catch those families with just a little bit of help. They can actually get their kid back on track.
Yeah, if you have the space to do that, talk about all those kids that are mentioned, that I think that's what we're missing, is like, there's not a, like, or there might.
So that's what she's saying, in policy, put in that we need to do these types of interventions.
But it's, I have a barrier to education, I looked it up while we're talking, it's already in statute, it says anything that's a barrier to a kid coming to school,
Right.
the SBLC team is supposed
Yeah,
to.
this
address
absence
it. If
here.
it has a specific to say attendance, we get people to do it, then maybe that's what needs to happen, but it's already saying that we need to be looking at barriers and attendance is barriers.
Maybe we should make a referral to the next level permissive at that chronic absentee Tuesday. That way, in case you all who are closest to the student know right away. Think that.
And I don't know how this could be addressed with.
No, you
recommendations.
no,
Many
on topic.
cases, especially with some pockets of kids who are absent, they are living with others.
Yep.
Right, and so the benefit for the court is that I have the ability to change custody.
Mhm.
You know, that they can walk out of the court with a custody change with the person that they're actually responding to.
Mhm.
And then have that person come and then connect them with the school system. And so that sometimes, because maybe the parent doesn't have an appreciation of school, but there are other grandparents and relatives that are trying to encourage that, but don't have the authority. They outside the school zone to attend the particular school that's closest to the grandparent's house. And so it's just all of those other, things, policies that are in place that they can't overcome it. And I just changed custody and, oh, okay. So he can stay here and he can go to school there and the bus is not an issue anymore. All of those things kind of fall, the low hanging fruit falls away.
So if we talk about parent notes, can I just ask 3, 4, 5, how many days?
I like 5 because it matches the, like, I don't think, put it like 2 or 3 is a random number, where it's 5 is like already the number we're saying is gonna trigger you, so like.
So 5-day parent,
How many days?
5 days.
5 days overall, 5 days.
5 days overall.
I mean, I'm asking, I'm not telling you guys.
How many notes you finish?
So 5.
Okay, wait, everybody gotta talk.
One note to cover the 5 and you're out.
Okay, so 5 days,
Stomach bugs are out.
yes. And at that point, they need to go to the doctor anyways.
So that's 5 days.
So we're gonna do a recommendation of,
One note.
One note would cover 5 days?
no. The amount of notes may vary depending on the date, cause a child could take a half a day or whatever. We're just saying 5 days, a parent notes. A note can be excused.
5 days.
5 days. But are y'all okay with that? Because I don't wanna just push it on anybody's throat.
So, okay, so she's asking semester or a year?
I think that was the interesting issue earlier, is there's limited definitions of
Semesters.
That's small, but the year 10 doesn't seem, so it's like, is semester the word that's a
I
problem?
think we should take that, that's why I can bring my hand.
Right.
So take
Cause some of us don't have semesters when we
Well,
go
if
here.
you do that, then you're gonna negatively impact those schools that do, block scheduling based on semesters.
I think we should.
What you're gonna do is allow kids to miss 6, 7 days of school, now you got a seat time issue, they can't get credit for classes.
Well, we should be doing attendance recovery for.
So is it 5 a year? It doesn't matter.
5 per semester or 10 per year. There we go. I think that's the problem, is the semester, it's not the.
And parent notes.
Because
That's
we're
a lot.
talking about the number of days that should be able to be excused via a parent note. So do y'all think that should be 5 per?
I think 5 per year.
5 per year.
5 per year. Cause you're still allowing another, 5 or 10 days when we get to the next definition of truancy, of a notification. So this is an addition to what we decide.
So that works if really if you do the absenteeism or the panel or the board, because you'll be able to identify the extenuating circumstances if there is a problem.
I agree.
Yeah.
You can catch that and you're not worried about this other
5 days, 5 would be enough
Right.
to address that. The other thing that I was thinking, because
So it's fine.
in some of the districts, you don't have readily a place for a family to take their child, or the financial barriers. And so there are so many, because of COVID, so many ways to provide services. Even my doctor said, hey, just if there's something small, you can call, or you can
Zoom.
video, you can Zoom.
Yeah.
Teleconference
He
now.
needs to look at my face, know that I am who I am, but he has a relationship that if I say
Yeah.
having stomach virus, he's gonna tell me what to do without me taking off from the bench to walk into the door. And so, and a lot of folks are doing that,
Yeah.
you know, that's kind of an isolated
No.
example. And so that doctor doesn't necessarily need to have a clinic
Mhm.
3 blocks over. You know,
And
they
so if
don't
we're gonna
have-
count those 5 excused, then when should truancy be reported? Right now, it's 5 days, so we do 5 unexcused, excused parent notes, plus 5, we are 10.
No, it would still be, I think it should still be 5, because those 5 notes have now become excused, so it would be 5, so. If
It's still unexcused.
It's 5.
So we're gonna leave it at 5. Okay.
The truancy would stay at 5 unexcused per semester.
Because now it's almost 10 yet,
You're okay with that?
so that's good. Yeah. So that gives us the 10 days that, I think we wanted the 10 days, so that gives us the 10 days. Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah, they should still be getting funds, no matter what they're.
This is
I just
not
think
what
the
she
key
wants
is to
over there.
make sure we're dealing with absenteeism. The 10% of seat time.
Right. So do you want chronic absenteeism to be 10% of days enrolled, or the equivalent number of minutes? Do y'all want to break it onto the minutes?
Because again, I go back to enrolled, so if I make my school year 180 days and yours is 120 days, they're still missing school. Now you're missing more of the 180 to reach it, but you're still missing school and you're missing more days. So I think it should just be a set amount of days, not based on a percentage of the year.
Why they do it. Difference between truancy and chronic absence.
Yeah.
Truancy, once you become truant, you're truant. Period. But chronically absent, that was another reason why we created the improvement in attendance award, because once you corrected the behavior, we want to acknowledge that the behavior has been corrected and that label has dropped. And it'll still get counted on the back end, but you're no longer carrying that label that requires you to keep getting certain interventions, or unless it's an intervention that keeps you motivated, then of course it stays. But if it's something that doesn't, that label drops.
Yeah, like, I mentioned, they usually that just have to do full year, even if they get out there, get more things like.
Yeah, because it's
Support after.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
How,
no.
they're not like, it's not an FA, everything's great, I don't need to, so they keep that, it's like all year, that they get out.
But we gotta stay on.
I would think
All
that
right.
the percentage needs to be 10% of the total year seat time. But if they're 10% of a specific point of the year, that needs to be a local decision to get involved in. But as far as a truancy standpoint, if you've got, I'm going to use arbitrary numbers. If you've got 1,000 minutes in a year, when you hit 100 minutes, you're true. But if we're only 250 minutes into the year and you've missed 25, you as a responsible administrator in a school need to be intervening at that point. But from a legal, I think what we're doing is we're conflating where responsibility comes in and where legal issues come in. And we need to avoid that. But
All right. To wrap this up, because we are over time and we did start 5 minutes late. So we're just 4 minutes over.
Great committee.
But y'all are great. We're going to have Ashley. Ashley is going to read out what we have right now. And the goal of us at LVOE is to look at these documents, look at the recommendations, kind of flesh them out. So when we come back to you in September, we kind of have something that you all can look at, ruminate on, whether or not we need to make additional changes. And then in November, when we meet again, we kind of take a vote on this is what we would like for, September, then November, I think it is. And then so that we can take it to Betsy, we can work with some legislatures to try and get some legislation if needed as well. So Ashley?
We do have some recommendations from the previous meeting in the documents. I believe that y'all been recording this. So Mr. Morris just wanted me to send his regrets in another meeting today that he wanted to know he wanted y'all to know how important this is to him. And some recommendations he wanted to make sure on the list are that we consider what Betsy should be monitoring, what data is important, and that was what we talked about today as well. What are the actionable steps and how can we track progress toward those, looking at the EdLink data and what other recommendations should be made toward that, looking at how we could have some kind of graphic representation of what we should be doing, and then still looking at the possibility of badging pilot programs and where those are, and then also prioritizing our collaboration with the Attorney General's office as well, which I know they're still doing that. And then the ones I've captured so far today. So I've gotten looking at developing out language about the role of and response to parent notes. So what can be excused by note? I've got the trigger at 5 days per year. And then at that point, they would go to a school level decision-making process, whether that's a different separate team, maybe leave some flexibility for how the school builds out that decision-making process, but that somebody's deciding something at that point. I'll look at consolidating team functions where possible and wording it so that it could be incorporated as part of SBLC. Or if a school district is doing something about a specific attendance team, so that it would work for that too. I have EdLink look at two-way synchronization to facilitate data preservation across districts when students move. Creating model program guidance to look at how we could line out with what's being done here in East Baton Rouge Parish to be able to share that across the state and look at how that could be replicated elsewhere. Prioritizing career exploration and extracurricular activities, even as early as elementary, to make sure that those students are engaging early. We want to leave the truancy definition at 5 unexcused per semester. That's both absences and tardies. We want to add the definition of chronic absenteeism and make that 10% of days in the school year. I think that's days enrolled in the school year. At that chronic absenteeism point, we want to require that student level decision, required intervention, but allow a permissive referral up to the next level to support that whenever it's going to be an issue. We still have some recommendations about parent notice. We've got that required written notice at 3 days, but I heard some good discussion too about other ways that notice could be graphically represented perhaps, or it could be ongoing, or it could be embedded in other systems of communication that parents receive. And then again, the parent note set at 5 days per school year, that 5 days per school year that can be excused via a parent note. And then after that, that school level team could make determinations for extenuating circumstances. that sound right?
And they receive their work no matter what.
Yes, the create a standardized form.
Oh, yeah. standardized
I would love
parent
to have
note.
a standardized, yeah, that is a very great idea.
Actually, I'd like to see it for digital.
Me too.
I mean, I get the notice, and I click send.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, to the school, maybe through Power School and through J, because we just met with those companies, so that would be,
Mhm.
and they want to help us.
Different languages.
Yes, that would be great.
Mhm.
So the.
Yeah.
We need to the Power School. All of that.
Mhm. Yeah. Mhm. All right. Well, we want to thank you all for coming today. We appreciate your time and your energy and your discussion. We will take all of this information and we'll be communicating with you. Our next meeting is in September. And then, but in the interim time, I'll provide that report to you all that's coming out from Attendance Works about this attendance scan they've done across the nation. That should be coming out next week, but I'll email that out to you all next week. Y'all have a great weekend. Thank you. Thank you.